An hour later, Madam Jennifer was arranging linens in the storage room when she heard hurried footsteps. She turned to see the same young girl rushing past, her face streaked with tears. Madam Jennifer froze as the girl stopped and looked at her, her expression filled with tears and anguish. "Why didn't you warn me?" the girl whispered, her voice breaking. Jennifer's heart sank, but her lips tightened. She said nothing as the girl ran out of the house, sobbing. For a moment, Jennifer stood there, her hands trembling. But then she forced herself to take a deep breath. "Not my business," she muttered under her breath. "Not my place to interfere." Her job paid well, and Ruth's university fees depended on it. What else could she do?
Hi, have you subscribed to our channel? Please kindly subscribe by clicking on the subscribe button below to help our channel grow. Hope you enjoy this story. Thank you and God bless you.
The mansion loomed before her as Jennifer walked through the iron gates. Jennifer moved with precision, overseeing the staff, double-checking every detail. Mr. Beyo Douglas expected perfection at all times. As she arranged the bed in his private quarters, Mr. Douglas entered, his tailored suit impeccable. "Jennifer," he said in his deep, commanding voice, "tonight's gathering is private. No outsiders except the guest I invited." Jennifer nodded. "Understood, sir. Everything will be handled discreetly." "Good." He adjusted his cufflinks. "That's why I trust you. You've never let me down." Jennifer didn't flinch at the weight of his gaze. "Thank you, sir. You can count on me." He smiled faintly and left, his footsteps echoing in the grand hallway. Jennifer turned back to her work, carefully placing bottles of imported champagne into an ice bucket. She had long learned to block out her suspicions about these private parties. They weren't her concern. Later that evening, as Jennifer prepared the final touches, there was a knock at the door. She opened it to find a young girl standing there, no older than 17 or 18. She was strikingly beautiful but looked nervous, clutching a small handbag. "Good evening," the girl said hesitantly. "I'm here for the ushering job interview." Jennifer's brows furrowed. "An interview? At this hour?" Her instincts whispered that something was off. But she had learned to stay in her lane. "Follow me," Jennifer said briskly, leading the girl through the winding corridors to the private quarters. She knocked on the door and stepped back. Mr. Douglas opened it, his smile broadening when he saw the girl. "Oh, right on time. Come in, my dear." Jennifer turned away, walking back down the hallway. She felt a pang of unease as the door clicked shut behind the girl. She shook it off. It wasn't her business. An hour later, Madam Jennifer was arranging linens in the storage room when she heard hurried footsteps. She turned to see the same young girl rushing past, her face streaked with tears. Madam Jennifer froze as the girl stopped and looked at her, her expression filled with tears and anguish. "Why didn't you warn me?" the girl whispered, her voice breaking. Jennifer's heart sank, but her lips tightened. She said nothing as the girl ran out of the house, sobbing. For a moment, Jennifer stood there, her hands trembling. But then she forced herself to take a deep breath. "Not my business," she muttered under her breath. "Not my place to interfere." Her job paid well, and Ruth's university fees depended on it. What else could she do? The following morning, after Mr. Douglas left for a meeting, Jennifer entered the private quarters to clean. She stepped into the lavishly decorated room, the scent of perfume and cigars still lingering in the air. She picked up empty glasses and straightened the furniture. Then she saw it. The bed, its pristine white sheets, was stained with blood. Jennifer's breath caught. Her hands hovered over the sheets as a wave of nausea swept through her. She stepped back, clutching her chest. The image of the crying girl flashed in her mind, and her unease deepened. But she didn't let herself dwell. She stripped the bed, replaced the sheets, and tidied the room as if nothing had happened. What do these girls expect? She thought bitterly. They throw themselves at men like him, chasing money and luxury. They know what they're doing. She wiped her hands on her apron, took one last look around the room, and left. When Jennifer got home, Ruth greeted her with a wide smile. The sight of her daughter, packing her suitcase with books and clothes, eased some of the tension in Jennifer's chest. "Mama," Ruth called. "I was just thinking about how much I'll miss your cooking." Jennifer chuckled softly, sitting beside her. "Don't get too used to hostile food, then. I'll visit often." That night, as Jennifer lay in bed, sleep evaded her. Her thoughts kept returning to the young girl's tear-streaked face and her haunting words, "Why didn't you warn me?" She tried to rationalize it. "It's not my place. What happens in that house has nothing to do with me." But the blood-stained sheets and the girl's broken voice gnawed at her conscience. For the first time in 15 years, Jennifer questioned whether her silence was a virtue or a curse. The clock ticked on, and as the first rays of dawn broke through the window, she sighed heavily. She had made her choice long ago, and it was too late to turn back now. Jennifer woke Ruth early the next morning to prepare for their trip to the university. As they packed the last of Ruth's belongings, Jennifer's phone buzzed. It was a message from Mr. Douglas. "Jennifer, come in early tomorrow. I have another private party planned. Usual discretion required." Jennifer stared at the message, her stomach twisting. She quickly deleted it and turned back to Ruth, plastering on a smile. By the time they reached the university, Ruth was buzzing with excitement, her eyes lighting up as she explored her new environment. Jennifer helped her settle into the hostel and hugged her tightly before leaving. As she walked away, Jennifer felt both pride and an ache of loneliness. Ruth was her world, but now she was stepping into a new chapter without her. The hum of the vacuum filled the large living room of Mr. Bear Douglas's mansion as Madam Jennifer worked meticulously, ensuring everything was spotless. She had perfected this routine over the last 15 years. Her work required discretion, and she was careful to keep her thoughts and emotions to herself. But as the television buzzed in the background, her attention was caught by a news report. This morning, the body of a young woman was found by the roadside near Victoria Crescent. Authorities say she was strangled, and the investigation is ongoing, the news anchor announced. Jennifer froze, her eyes glued to the screen as a photograph of the girl appeared. It was the same young girl who had run out crying from Mr. Douglas's private quarters just days ago. Her heart skipped a beat. The look of betrayal in the girl's eyes flashed in her memory. "Why didn't you warn me?" the girl had said. The image of the girl running, her tears staining her face, played vividly in Jennifer's mind. She stood there in shock, her chest tightening. Could this be connected to here? She wondered. But she quickly shook the thought away. "May she rest in peace," she muttered under her breath and returned to her work. She was alive when she left the house, Jennifer reassured herself, though the unease lingered. Ruth pulled her suitcase into the small hostel room, her heart racing with excitement and nerves. She glanced at the three girls who had already made themselves comfortable. The room buzzed with laughter and chatter. "You must be Ruth," one of them said, stepping forward with a bright smile. She was tall and slender, with perfectly styled braids. "I'm Sochi. Welcome to your new home." "Thank you," Ruth said, smiling shyly. "I'm Brenda," another girl said, giving Ruth a warm hug. "And this is Mara." Mara, who was perched on the bed reading a book, looked up and nodded. "Nice to meet you, Ruth." The girls quickly enveloped Ruth in their energy, offering her snacks and chatting about campus life. Ruth felt a sense of relief. She had made her first set of friends. That night, the girls lounged in the room, discussing plans for the weekend. So, Sochi began, her eyes twinkling, "There's this exclusive party happening on Saturday, and we've got invites." Brenda clapped her hands in excitement. "It's hosted by Mr. Douglas himself. They say his parties are legendary." Ruth stiffened, her heart sinking. "Mr. Douglas," she echoed. "Yes, the billionaire," Sochi said. "You know, the one who owns half the businesses in the city. He's super secretive, but his parties are the talk of the town." Ruth's mind raced. How could she tell them her mother worked for this man? If they found out, they might think less of her. And what if her mother recognized her? "That sounds exciting," Ruth said carefully, forcing a smile. "It's going to be amazing." Sochi said. "Everyone wears masks, so it's all very mysterious. You're coming with us, right?" Ruth hesitated. She didn't want to disappoint her new friends. "Sure," she said finally. "I'll come." That night, Ruth lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. "How can I go to that party?" she thought. "What if Mama sees me?" But the thought of telling her friends she couldn't go was equally daunting. "They'll never know who I am," she whispered to herself. "And Mama will be too busy to notice me in a mask." The mansion was bustling with activity as Madam Jennifer supervised the staff in preparation for the weekend's party. She ensured that every corner of the house gleamed, every bottle of champagne was chilled, and every detail was flawless. Her mind drifted to the young girl on the news. She had tried to suppress the thought, but it gnawed at her. She wondered if anyone else in the house had noticed the girl's disappearance. The staff whispered rumors, but Jennifer silenced them quickly. "There's no time for gossip," she told them sharply. "Focus on your work." But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. In the hostel, the girls helped Ruth get ready. Sochi handed her a sleek black dress and a gold mask. "You're going to look like a goddess," Sochi said, adjusting Ruth's hair. "Do we really have to wear masks?" Ruth asked nervously. "That's the rule," Brenda said. "Total anonymity. It's part of what makes these parties so exciting." Ruth smiled weakly. She hoped the mask would be enough to keep her mother from recognizing her. The mansion was unrecognizable under the glow of golden lights and the hum of soft chairs. Guests in elaborate masks mingled in the grand hall, their laughter echoing off the high ceilings. Ruth stepped inside with her friends, her heart pounding. She tried to stay close to them, scanning the room nervously. Sochi grinned. "See? Isn't this amazing?" Ruth nodded, her eyes darting around. She spotted Mr. Douglas from a distance, his imposing figure commanding attention. She shivered, suddenly understanding why her mother always spoke of him with such caution. Madam Jennifer moved through the crowd, ensuring everything ran smoothly. As she scanned the guests, her eyes landed on a girl in a sleek black dress and a gold mask. Something about her felt familiar. Jennifer's chest tightened. Could it be Ruth? She shook her head. No, Ruth wouldn't come here. She knows better. But the unease lingered. The grand hall buzzed with excitement as masked guests swirled around in glittering gowns and tailored suits. Ruth clung to Sochi, trying to blend in with the crowd. She felt a gnawing unease but convinced herself to stay for the sake of her new friends. The mood shifted suddenly as men in sharp suits began ushering the young woman into separate rooms. Ruth's stomach churned when a man in a dark mask approached her and Sochi. "This way, ladies," he said, his tone clipped. Ruth exchanged a nervous glance with Sochi, who shrugged it off. "Relax," Sochi whispered, "It's probably just some VIP section." They were led down a dimly lit hallway, the sounds of laughter fading behind them. The man stopped outside a huge door, opening it to reveal a lavishly decorated bedroom. Ruth's heart raced as they stepped inside. The door slammed shut, and moments later, Mr. Douglas entered with another man. The jovial charm he exuded in public was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating demeanor. "Get on the bed," he barked, his voice slicing through the tense silence. Ruth froze, her hands trembling. I want to leave," she stammered. "I didn't sign up for this." Mr. Douglas's eyes narrowed. "You're not going anywhere. Do as you're told." Ruth fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "Please, sir. Let me go. I won't tell anyone. I just want to leave." His expression darkened. With a swift motion, he struck her across the face with the back of his hand. She cried out in pain as he grabbed her arm and threw her onto the bed. Sochi stood paralyzed in the corner, her face pale. "Sir, please," "She doesn't want to." "Shut up," Mr. Douglas snapped. "You're next." In the hallway, Madame Jennifer carried a tray of champagne glasses, her steps measured and precise. She prided herself on keeping her emotions in check, but the muffled cries coming from the private quarters made her pause. She stood still for a moment, her instincts urging her to investigate. But years of working for Mr. Douglas had taught her to stay out of his business. "These girls," she muttered under her breath. "Always chasing after money and power. They know what they're getting into." She shook her head and continued down the hallway, her hands steady despite the turmoil brewing inside her. As she walked away, she felt a pang of guilt but shrugged it off. "Thank God Ruth isn't like them," she whispered. After what felt like an eternity, Mr. Douglas dismissed Ruth and Sochi. His cold warning echoed in their ears, "If either of you speaks a word of this, you'll regret it. Do you understand?" Ruth nodded numbly, clutching her face where the bruise was already forming. Sochi grabbed her hand, and they stumbled out of the room, tears streaming down their masked faces. At the end of the hallway, Madame Jennifer saw the two girls. Something about the girl in the black dress and gold mask struck a familiar chord. She watched as they ran past her, their sobs muffled by the opulent walls. "Children of nowadays," Jennifer muttered, shaking her head. "Always making bad decisions." Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced at it, Ruth's name flashed on the screen. She hesitated for a moment, then put the phone away. "She's probably asleep," Jennifer said to herself, forcing the thought of the girl in the gold mask out of her mind. Ruth and Sochi entered their hostel room in silence. Brenda and Mara looked up from their beds, their expressions turning to concern as they noticed the girls' tear-streaked faces. "What happened?" Brenda asked, rushing to Ruth's side. "Are you okay?" Sochi collapsed onto her bed, covering her face with her hands. "We don't want to talk about it." Ruth retreated to the bathroom, locking the door behind her. She peeled off her mask and stared at her reflection. The bruise on her cheek was already darkening, a cruel reminder of the night's events. She sank to the floor, sobbing silently. "Why did I go? Why didn't I listen to my instincts?" Back at the mansion, Jennifer finished her shift and headed home. She tried calling Ruth again but received no answer. Her unease grew, but she convinced herself it was nothing. "She's probably busy settling in," Jennifer muttered as she unlocked the door to her small apartment. She tried to focus on the thought of Ruth thriving at university, but the image of the girl in the gold mask haunted her. Could it be Ruth? She wondered, shaking her head. No. My Ruth would never go to a place like that. The next morning, Ruth woke up to Sochi's muffled sobs. Her phone buzzed with a missed call from her mother, and guilt twisted in her stomach. She couldn't keep this to herself any longer. With trembling hands, she called Jennifer. "Ruth?" Jennifer answered, her voice filled with concern. "Are you okay? I tried calling you last night." "Mama," Ruth's voice broke. "I need to tell you something." Jennifer's heart sank. "What is it? Are you hurt?" "I went to Mr. Douglas's party," Ruth confessed, her words tumbling out in a rush. "I didn't know what it was really about." "Mama, something terrible happened." Jennifer sat down heavily, the phone trembling in her hand. You were there." "Oh my God, Ruth. Tell me everything." As Ruth recounted the events of the night, Jennifer felt like the ground had been ripped out from under her. The girl in the gold mask. The screams. It was her daughter all along. Why didn't I stop it? Jennifer whispered, her voice choked with guilt. Why didn't I do something? Madam Jennifer stormed into Mr. Douglas's office, her fists clenched, her heart pounding with anger and fear. Mr. Douglas, seated behind his massive mahogany desk, didn't even look up as she entered. "Mr. Douglas, we need to talk," she said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. He finally looked up, his face a mask of cold amusement. "Jennifer, barging into my office like this. Very unprofessional." Jennifer stepped closer, her hands trembling. "You hurt my daughter. I trusted you, worked for you for 15 years, and this is how you repay me?" Mr. Douglas leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing on his lips. "Your daughter? Oh, you mean one of the many naive girls who thought they could outwit me? Let me tell you something, Jennifer. I record everything that happens at my parties." Jennifer's breath caught. What do you mean?" He pulled out a small remote and pressed a button. A large screen descended from the ceiling, and a video began to play. Jennifer gasped as she saw Ruth and Sochi in his private quarters. "You see," he said smugly, "I have leverage over everyone who attends my parties. Your daughter is no exception. Try to expose me, and I'll make sure her video is plastered all over the internet." Jennifer's knees buckled, but she steadied herself on the edge of the desk. "You're a monster," she whispered. "Perhaps," he said with a shrug, "but a very powerful one. Now, you're fired. Leave my house and don't come back, or you'll regret it." Tears streaming down her face, Jennifer turned and fled the room. At home, Jennifer sat at the kitchen table, staring at the grain of the wood as Ruth and Sochi watched her anxiously. "Mama, what happened?" Ruth asked, her voice shaking. Jennifer wiped her tears and looked at her daughter. "He has videos, Ruth. Of you, of everyone. He threatened to release them if I speak out." Sochi gasped, covering her mouth. "What are we going to do?" Jennifer straightened her back, her face hardening with determination. "We're going to stop him. He won't hurt another girl. Not ever again." Jennifer gathered Ruth, Sochi, and their friends Brenda and Maura around the table. She outlined her plan, her voice steadied despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "I've worked for Mr. Douglas long enough to know his routines," Jennifer began. "There's another party this weekend. During the first 20 minutes, he'll be busy entertaining guests. That's when you'll sneak into his private quarters." Brenda raised an eyebrow. "Sneak into his quarters? Are you sure this will work?" Jennifer nodded. "I know the code to his bedroom and the safe where he keeps the recordings. You'll retrieve everything." Maura's eyes widened. "And what if we get caught?" Jennifer's gaze softened. "You won't. Follow my instructions, and you'll be safe." The girls exchanged nervous glances before Brenda finally spoke. We'll do it. The party was in full swing, the grand hall filled with masked guests and soft music. Brenda, Mara, and Sochi moved through the crowd, keeping an eye on the time. Ruth stayed behind, too shaken to return to the mansion. When the clock struck 20 minutes past the hour, the girls slipped away, hearts pounding. They reached Mr. Douglas's bedroom door, and Brenda punched in the code Jennifer had given them. The lock clicked open. The room was luxurious, with heavy drapes and a massive bed. They moved to the large painting on the wall, just as Jennifer had described. Mara slid it aside, revealing the safe. Brenda entered the code, and the door swung open to reveal rows of flash drives. So many, Sochi whispered, her hands trembling as she began gathering them into her purse. As they replaced the painting, the sound of a code being entered at the door froze them in place. Without thinking, they dove under the bed, their breaths shallow and quiet. The door opened, and Mr. Douglas entered with a thick-built man who exuded menace. From under the bed, the girls trembled as they listened. Mara, her hands shaking, hit the record button on her phone, capturing every word. "Madam Jennifer has become a problem," Mr. Douglas said coldly. "I need you to take care of her." The man grunted. "You want it done like the last one?" Mr. Douglas's tone darkened. "No. The last girl was messy. Leaving her by the roadside was sloppy and attracted too much attention. This time, no loose ends." "Understood," the man replied. The two men left the room, their conversation hanging in the air like a noose. Once the coast was clear, the girls scrambled out from under the bed and fled through the back gate as instructed by Madam Jennifer. Adrenaline propelling them as they ran through the mansion's back gate until they saw a taxi. Back at Ruth's house, the girls dumped the flash drives and Mara's recording on the table. Madam Jennifer stared at the pile, her heart racing. "You did it," Madam Jennifer whispered, tears filling her eyes. "You actually did it." Mara handed her the phone. "We also recorded something. You need to hear this." Jennifer's blood ran cold as she listened to Mr. Douglas's voice ordering her death. She clenched her fists. "He won't get away with this. We have enough evidence to prove that he also had that young girl murdered." She went through the flash drives, her hands shaking. When she found the one labeled with the date Ruth and Sochi had attended, she quietly slipped it into her pocket. "We'll use the rest," she said firmly. "But this one. I can't let anyone see it." The girls all nodded in agreement. The next morning, Madam Jennifer contacted the police and a popular TV station promising them an exclusive. She arranged to meet them at the police station, ensuring everything would be recorded live. She knew Mr. Douglas was very influential in the society and could manipulate the police. She didn't want to take any chances. As cameras rolled, Madam Jennifer presented the evidence to the police, detailing Mr. Douglas's crimes. "This man has hurt countless young women," she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "It's time he pays for what he's done." The police moved quickly, raiding the mansion and arresting Mr. Douglas. The live broadcast captured everything, and the nation watched in shock as his empire crumbled. That evening, Madam Jennifer sat on the couch, watching the news coverage of Mr. Douglas's arrest. Ruth sat beside her, holding her hand. "You did it, Mama," Ruth said softly. "You stopped him." Jennifer nodded, but her heart was heavy. The image of the young girl who had died and the sound of Ruth's screams haunted her. "I ignored the cries for help for 15 years, Jennifer said, her voice breaking. "And it nearly cost me you." Ruth squeezed her hand. "But you didn't stay silent, Mama. You fought back. You saved so many others." Jennifer closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. "I just hope it's enough. I'll carry the weight of my silence forever." As the news anchor spoke of the young girls who had suffered and the lives that would now be spared, Jennifer whispered a prayer for forgiveness to God and vowed to honor the memory of those she had failed.
Hi, have you subscribed to our channel? Please kindly subscribe by clicking on the subscribe button below to help our channel grow. Hope you enjoy this story. Thank you and God bless you.